Jimmy, let's change gears a little bit. Tennessee's secondary, and at some point, I think we have to ask ourselves: the guys they had just not good. Not the fact that they were inexperienced or learning a new system. And I don't want to throw out names and besmirch anyone, but at what point do we say that some of the players that Tennessee's thrown out there in the secondary just are not good football players?
I remember being at the Orange Bowl, and the beat writers from Clemson were like, Tennessee's secondary ranked 127th in the country in yards per game. Yeah. They ranked 127th? Yes. I think there were three factors. One, Tennessee typically on offense jumped out to a lead. Look at their first quarter scoring. So a lot of teams had to pass to catch up. Secondly, I think Tennessee stacked the line of scrimmage to stop the run, and they ranked in the top, 3 or 4 in the SEC in run defense. So I think that was another factor. The third factor, they weren't very good. So
yeah,
that and I was talking to somebody recently about, well, you have to have a great pass rush. Okay, but you can't have a great pass rush on 100% of the opponent's drop back passes. 30% is probably a good ratio, but not 100. So you've got to cover people. And they haven't. Here's what confounds me a little bit, Dave. They have enough players that either were highly recruited or that are very athletic, and for whatever reason, they didn't do a very good job of pass coverage. And so I think the talent is there to not be great, but to at least be decent to pretty good. They got to get on the same page. I think there was some busts in the secondary and just some moments where they weren't any good. And by golly, you can't go out there and get beat play after play and then celebrate it when you tackle somebody 20 yards down the field. You know, that kind of nonsense that went on against South Carolina, they need to get rid of that.
Great point. Willie Martinez, he was the only coach that wasn't re-upped his contract beyond this year. And he's been around the SEC, so you probably have a lot of knowledge of him that I don't. What are your thoughts on Tennessee's defensive backs coach Martinez, just in general? Is some of this coaching?
Here's what I think of Martinez right now. I think Martinez is a pretty good evaluator of talent. I remember when his first tenure at Tennessee, he talked about how good Justin Coleman was and he was going to be a pretty good player in the NFL. And I'm like, what? Well, he was. He was right about that. So I actually think that Martinez is probably better at judging talent than he is coaching talent.
Yeah, that's a fair. Yeah, I could see that. As far as Tennessee's young defensive backs, or maybe guys that take a next step, is there anybody out there that you particularly look at and think this guy could elevate Tennessee secondary play?
Kristen Charles. I think he's a pretty good player. I think if he can stay healthy, he will help them in the secondary. And I know they got a lot of other guys, Turnage and Haddon and some of these guys. The other one I'm curious about is the transfer from Brigham Young that started his career at Vanderbilt.
Judy Lawley.
Yes, he might be a guy that could help them in the secondary. But Charles is the one that I like based on what I've seen. Now, I've heard good things about Harrison, whose dad was an NFL star. I haven't seen it myself. So I'm going to go Kristen Charles. I'll give you one other one, too, that I've heard really good things about. Jordan Thomas. I think he's another guy that could step up and help him in the secondary.
Yeah, it's funny. Christian Harrison is the son of the player who, had he not been hurt, Peyton Manning probably never gets a ring with the Colts. It's an interesting hot take. Rodney Harrison was hurt in that game when Peyton Manning led that epic comeback, and he used Dallas Clark a lot for that reason. So, Jimmy, as we're talking about freshmen, you seem to be higher on the freshman at safety. I've been high on the freshman at cornerback. I thought Jordan Matthews or Ricky Gibson was going to steal one of those starting jobs. Do you think that's a possibility, or do you think they're not ready?
I think it's a possibility. And actually, I've heard more good things about Matthews and Gibson, but who knows? I mean, it's really early in the process. I do like the recruiting class they brought in with defensive backs, and they are talented. How long will it take them to learn the system? I don't know. But here's the thing about it. To me, as a freshman, it's easier to play cornerback because basically they're saying, go guard that guy. It's safety. You have to know a lot more about the inner workings, who's doing this, who's doing that. So I think that's harder to play the safety position in college and cornerback because the responsibilities are greater.
I feel like I've seen flashes from Danico Slaughter.
Yeah.
Jimmy, are you high, low, somewhere in the middle on him based off what you're hearing?
I've got a wait and see attitude on him.
Me too.
I've heard nice things about him, and he's done some good things, and they expect him to be better. But I haven't seen it on the field consistently. And I think he's a hard hitter, but as far as his ability, his pass coverage skills, I want to see some more out of him before I say, "Yep, I believe in that guy."
I can certainly understand that. Jimmy, great stuff as always. We look forward to visiting with you each and every Wednesday and what should be a huge season for Tennessee, but also it's kind of a cool time to be around college football. I don't know where you stand as far as the college football playoff and all that, but it's interesting to see the changes each and every week. So I don't think we'll lack anything to talk about.
No, I like the college football eventually expanding. I thought it was funny that when they only had 2 teams, it was like, well, nobody, it's too hard to have a 4-team playoff. You remember all that nonsense? Now we're going to 12. Okay, so don't give me all that stuff about it's too hard to have 4. But yeah, I like that. I think it's going to be fun to watch it. I think it's going to be electric to see teams, and last year Tennessee would have been one of them, to host a playoff game on their campus. I think that's going to be cool.
Yeah, I do too. Playoff origination story, my favorite is when you and I, because John Wilkerson, I think, was in the radio room, we're at SEC Media Days, and Commissioner Kramer at the time was on with us. And I asked the question, and here's how I phrased it. Roy, do you realize that what you've done with the BCS seeds teams and that could lead to a playoff, which he was anti-playoff. And then I remember afterwards, Jimmy saying, might want to call him commissioner.
Yeah. I remember that.
I don't know if you remember that.
He's only 60 years older, but yeah.
Just to quickly push back on both of y'all. Y'all are right. The logistical thing made no sense for the playoff. But I also remember when there were 2 teams and there was always a 3rd team. And they're like, if we just go to 4, we could solve these issues. Now we're at 4, and they're like, oh, we got to go to 12 and we'll solve it. And now 13 is going to complain.
Basketball went to 68 and they're still complaining. The 69th and 70th team are, well, how come we didn't get in? Who are the teams that were left out? Yeah, so there's always going to be a complaint, Caleb. You're right about that.